What's up, everyone, and welcome into the Buffalo Sports Collective. It is Wednesday, August 23rd, 2023. As always, I am PK, alongside my co-host, Phil. Phil, we had both of our drafts this weekend. How do you think you did?
Really, I think I did really well in the second one. And the first one, I flubbed pretty hard. The 18-team, it's the first time ever doing an 18-team guillotine league, and the extra two teams, it doesn't sound like a lot, but 18 teams for one round is an insane amount. And by the time we got to round 3, 4, 5, 6, and you're still looking at active players to start in week one, and you're looking at the list and saying none of these guys will likely even play a snap this year, and it's brutal. And I had a solid plan going into it. The first 4 rounds I was going to get one of each position, and I was going to be set. I was good. I was done. And from there, whatever happened. I kind of filled out the team. But all the top quarterbacks were gone because you took the last good one of the top QBs right before my pick. And I was like, okay, I'll just get a really solid RB2. Not a big deal. And then for some reason, I just kept punting the position farther and farther and farther down the line until I ended up with Anthony Richardson and Purdy as my backup. So if I'm out week one again, it's my fault, and it's because I just kept not going after a quarterback for pretty much ever. So yeah, not looking too good, not too confident about that team. The rest of it's okay, but day 2 went much better for me. Some things fell to me in the draft, which I was very excited about. So happy about day 2. Guillotine, I currently don't expect to last very long.
I have found out in this past 2 days that apparently I'm a big Justin Fields fan, and my season is going to be made or break by Justin Fields. I drafted him on Saturday in the Guillotine League because he fell to me. Like you said, you were probably going to grab him if I didn't. And then he just, I wanted Justin Herbert on Sunday in our home league, and he didn't fall to me. I think he went 2 picks before me, and I went, okay, he's the last of my tier 2 quarterbacks. Got to grab him, and then I paired him with DJ Moore. But my whole season over there, see if I can defend my championship, comes down to, 1, will Josh Jacobs be back by week 1? Sounds like he is. How healthy will he be going into camp now that he doesn't have a training camp? Number 2, now that all the news is breaking about Jonathan Taylor, where does he end up? Because he fell to me because I was drafting 10th on Sunday. Where does he end up? Does he stay in Indy, which it doesn't sound like he's going to? Where does he go? Because I took him in the second round of our keeper league, and it was pick 1 in round 2, and it could be very bad for me if both of them. My season's over if neither of them pan out, Phil. It'll go right down the drain, and I might as well just hand the trophy to somebody else.
Yeah, I think Jacobs will be fine, and Taylor, like you said, it all depends on where he ends up going. I don't see him as a bust, but his ceiling might be capped depending on where he ends up. And I can't imagine wherever he ends up, him ending up in some kind of timeshare unless, I don't know, I just don't see him in a timeshare with anybody, no matter who picks him up. Like, they're going to trade probably a lot for him. So I would imagine he's going to be the main guy wherever he ends up. So it just depends on how good that team is, that offensive line, and what he can actually make happen. But I think you'll be all right.
I'm hoping. I think the only issue Taylor is if he has any kind of competition in the backfield, because in Indy, besides Anthony Richardson and maybe Michael Pittman, there was no other talents really on that offensive side of the ball. And with the rookie quarterback, he was going to run a lot, so it definitely hurts a bit. But if you all out there want to let us know what your fantasy team looks like, we love fantasy, and we got a fantasy segment on this show. You can follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Threads at Buffalo Sports Collective, and on Twitter at Buffalo Sports Co. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel wherever you listen to podcasts. Check out our website at buffalosportscollective.com and look for the time breakdowns in the description of the show. Phil, before we dive into the actual show, we saw Scott Loeffler, one of the front office people for the Buffalo Bandits, put out on Bandits Mafia, I believe it is, Curtis Wagger, I believe that's how you pronounce his last name. He is a former Buffalo Bandit. He needs our help. His friends and family have lost at least 5 homes in the wildfires up in Canada. There is a GoFundMe set up to help them. And if you have any extra cash that you can pass along, I know it's tough times right now, but if there is any cash that you can afford that you can comfortably afford, it will help them out a ton. We will make sure that we include a link in all of our posts on Wednesday to make it easier for you to find. But I just wanted to make sure that anybody out there that does support the Bandits, this is a huge opportunity that you can go out and actually help one of the former Buffalo Bandits. And, it's all one Buffalo, that whole spiel with the Bills, Bandits, Sabres. This is a huge way to show your support for a former Buffalo Bandit. So just passing that along again, we'll put the link in all of our posts. But Phil, another sad moment here, and we got to talk about it because I think we want to pay tribute to the man, Rick Jeanneret, the voice of not just the Buffalo Sabres, but thousands of people's childhoods, passed away on Thursday night. I know I got the tweet, and I found the tweet once we got home. Me and Brooke went to the Bison's game on Thursday because Bo Bichette was up in town, and Brooke loves Bo Bichette, but we had to get in there. This one, I know he doesn't like being called the voice of the Buffalo Sabres, but to me and a lot of other people, he is the voice of the Buffalo. This one hurts a lot, Phil. I'm not typically one that lets pain or hurt bother me. I mean, my family is very well known to kind of push that stuff deep down and deal with it another time, and more try to bring a smile to other people's faces when times are the toughest. And I think that's what we're going to try to do today. And Phil, it's a weird kind of thing because RJ was a man that I don't think I ever met. I believe I might have had a picture with him at some point or a signature somewhere, but you never really have truly met the person, yet he managed to have such an influence on my life, in so many ways. I think the best part about all of it is I don't think there are any memories, including RJ, that are negative. I mean, you don't remember any of the sad calls. There's no times that I remember that are a bad memory. Every single memory I have of him is of those insane calls. All the quotes, and we're going to dive into it in a minute, but all the calls on the ice. I remember as a kid, I say it all the time, but I leave the room, and then you had to run back in the room because you hear his voice kind of get more high-pitched and louder because there's a big moment on the ice. I tell the story all the time that I'm the kid that was in the basement pretending to be Hasek in my parents' basement in Mongolia gear, and Rick was the voice that made it feel real at times. But I'm just so happy that the organization, the fan base, and the whole hockey world was able to say thank you to Rick, to the whole RJ night. I thought that was the time that the arena came back to life, and it had not been alive in a very long time, and RJ did that. Not the players on the ice, Rick did that. Rick, RJ, I just want to say thank you for the memories and making my childhood that much better with your passion and your voice.
Yeah, I mean, it's yeah. There's only so much you can say here. Like you said, we'll go through some of the quotes in a little bit, but like you said, I mean, he just put such a staple on Buffalo Sabres hockey for so long. And you think, I mean, oftentimes you and I watch away games, and this is not a shot at any other announcers out there, but Jeanneret just made Sabres games different. He made hockey different. He's known as one of the best in the business for a reason. And there's only a handful of other guys I know that I really enjoy kind of listening to when you watch away games or watch other announcers or highlights of, just different teams. There's a few other announcers out there that I really enjoy listening to, but Jeanneret was just kind of in a league of his own, and Buffalo Sabres hockey just wouldn't be what it was, especially to you and I and just our generation. We grew up when this team was really good back in the day, and they were making a lot of playoff pushes, and they had a lot of just insane moments, really exciting moments, and just being around his calls and just how much of a level he made and a difference he made to the games you're watching to, raise that excitement level with those calls, like you mentioned, and just his attitude toward everything. Like you said, not too many bad moments that you can remember, if any at all. So for everything that he did, it was really good to have him a part of our lives. Like you said, even if we've never met the man, you just feel like he's a part of, your childhood, you're growing up, your everything when you watch the Sabres, and they play a lot of games, and we've watched a lot of them, and he was a part of 99% of them. So having him around for all of that, and like you said, not really knowing him, but at the same time knowing him, it was really great to have him as a Buffalo Sabres announcer and part of our lives.
Yeah, I think what actually helped the Sabres be more of my love than the Bills was what you just said, was the Sabres were good in our childhood. And when you're younger, you kind of gravitate towards the good teams and kind of push the bad teams, but kind of towards the back of the line. And that's what the Bills were. I mean, they had just finished the 4 Super Bowl runs, but, you know,
Not with us.
I was, I think, 2 at the time of the last Super Bowl run. I think you were 3 at that point. It's just, I wasn't alive during those heydays. We were alive during the drought. For Sabres, that was our whole childhood, was the 05, 06, 06, 07 runs. All those are the majority of my quotes for Rick Jeanneret. And like you said, there's never going to be another Rick Jeanneret. There's only going to be people that try to compete to him. You can't be Rick Jeanneret. People will try to imitate him. They can't do it. But I think we wanted to pay somewhat of a tribute to the man that was the voice of Sabres fandom, and I don't think there's any other way to try to do that other than just going over some of our favorite quotes from him. And Phil, I'm stealing this one because I think I know which one's your favorite one, but mine is hands down, no doubt, it is Pominville's shorthanded goal versus Ottawa to send them to the Eastern Conference Finals. The now do you believe these guys are good, scary good. I know it's one of the most popular ones out there, but that one is just, they were shorthanded. It was, I remember Jay McKee went to the box and he was the first one to greet Pominville after he scores that and wraps it around Ray Emery. That's one that I will never forget. And when that anniversary comes around and they have those tweets flying all over the place, I watch it over and over and over again, not just for the goal because it was an unbelievable goal, but the call is what made it that much better.
And that's kind of exactly what Jeanneret brought. Like, you can,
right,
if you hear that call, you don't even have to watch the video. You know exactly what happened, and you know you can visualize that exact play based on the call, and exactly like you said, even if the entire play had already happened and you just hear that call, which was already after the goal, after everything was happening, you can picture that entire moment, the entire arena, everything that was happening in that moment. And who was it? Emery, right, was sitting on the ice.
He was
very, very, very sad. And it was amazing to just see him sitting there doing nothing because, I mean, it was such an intense series, obviously, with the Sabres and Ottawa. And back in their heyday, those two teams really hated each other. And it was just an incredible moment. And like you said, the call just took it to that next level. And that was going to be my number one. And it's popular for a reason. You know, I mean, things like that are popular because of what happened, because of the atmosphere around it, and it's a good reason that it's a popular one and one of the best out there. Arguably the number one quote that he really has. I mean, another one that comes to mind for me that was really big toward the top of my head was exactly what you put in our notes, and it wasn't even really a quote. It was just a gasp, and it was the Brian Campbell hit
it was
on
awesome.
Umberger, and just like you said, I mean, you have it written down as the gasp in our notes, and it was exactly that, just like you don't even know what to say kind of moment before he kicked in and really started talking about that hit and just the noise he made from that hit. And it's just something you don't often see that much in hockey. I mean, yes, there's really hard hits, but the Sabres were not known as a very hard-hitting team, and Campbell came out of absolutely nowhere with that hit. It's one of the ones that I remember extremely well, and I think it's another one that will pretty much just stand the test of time as just one of the biggest hits and one of the better Rick Jeanneret moments out there.
Yeah, I think my second favorite. I mean, it's hard. It's like parents always say, it's you can't pick your favorite child. Even though I've said on multiple occasions, every parent has a favorite child. They're just afraid to admit it. I named my favorite child apparently, but I think my second one, and because I grew up trying to be Hasek, was the "Oh brother, we are now worthy," where he just makes that the one of millions of acrobatic saves that Dominic Hasek made. But it's again, I know Hasek is an all-time great goaltender. He is one of, if not the best goaltender that's ever played in the NHL. But the calls that Rick made of Hasek, I'm not saying it brought him to another level, but it made his highlight reel saves that much better when you play it on ESPN and you play it on NHL Network and you play it on, even back then, before YouTube and stuff. Now it's on YouTube and parents are showing their kids all these calls. And I heard so many people, because Friday I couldn't stop listening to WGR. It was just unbelievable, the stories that just rolled in time after time after time. And I can't believe what the hosts were able to do and keep their composure and take all the calls and everything. But just parents that were saying, hey, my kids aren't going to be able to hear Rick Jenneret live, but I'm going to play those videos. And that's exactly what it is for a lot of kids now is they didn't know Hashik. They didn't get those calls, and now you got to watch them on YouTube. That's what's nice about Rick Jenneret's calls is they're never going to go away as long as you have the internet close by. That's got to be my second one is, oh, brother, we are not worthy. And I know I probably grabbed like two of the top ones, but they're two of the top ones for a reason.
Exactly. I mean, and just like you said, I mean, we've said it a few times on here already, but just what he brought and the atmosphere that he brought and raised, all these plays are fantastic by themselves. And yes, they're really great, but they take a whole nother level with him calling it and the calls he made. And you just think about any sport and whatever you want to, call out, whatever moment you want to call out, and what you remember most is what was said by the announcer. Like, yes, you remember that play, but you also remember what was said in that moment, whether it be, the Buffalo Bills making playoffs for the first time in forever with that, Cincinnati and Ravens game. Like, you remember just the calls that are made in these big moments. You remember almost more than the play. Like, the call is what kind of rings in your head because that's the kind of text or, whatever you want to put, the quote that you could put to that moment. And that's what you kind of remember the most is that quote. And then, yes, you remember that play, but you remember that quote more than anything. And just what he was able to bring in some of these massive moments, it just raised every single one of these calls and every single one of these plays to that next level and just really makes you remember them that much easier and that much more. And like you said, as long as, people are passing these stories down and YouTube exists, I think he will be not forgotten for a very, very, very long time and most likely ever.
Yeah, so once again, Rick, thank you for making our childhoods that much better and more entertaining just by your voice. Again, never met the man, heard amazing things about him. I can't remember who it was that was on WGR that said there's not a person in the world that can say one bad thing about Rick Jenneret, and I don't think there's another person around the world that can say that. And it's just he was such a good person around the fans. He would always go down and greet the fans, and you don't get that very often in this world anymore. It's just unbelievable. He's definitely going to be missed, and it's just all I got to say is just thank you, because this one hurts, but we're going to get through it, and it's there's plenty of film out there of his voice that he's never really going to go quietly into the night. But Phil, there's never a good transition for this. I always hate doing this part because there's really no transition. So I'm just going to dive into it. The Bills, they did have a game on if you want to call it a game on Saturday. It's already preseason, and then they made me sit and watch this one. Phil, it was ugly and it was horrible. 13 accepted penalties for the Bills. Plenty of them were pre-snap. I thought besides 2 plays for the defense, they played well. It was that long Warren touchdown and then the quick touchdown throw from, it was still Kenny Pickett at that time, to Freiermuth in the end zone after a big punt return. Otherwise, I thought they did good considering the spot that the offensive put them in. What were your overall thoughts of the game? Because there are some bright points in the giant turd that was a game on Saturday.
Yeah, it's scary. Overall, I think would be the best way to put it. I understand it's preseason. You never want to overreact to any of this, whether it's high or low. You don't want to get too excited about a really good preseason game. You don't want to get too low about a bad one, but they just didn't look like they showed up to play and just didn't care that much about the game. I mean, again, I know it's preseason, but you're trying to tune up and kind of ramp up your workouts, your summer, your workload as you get closer to the season. And the offense looked brutal. I mean, one of the Allens performed okay, and that was Kyle and not Josh. And Josh did fine-ish, but the offense as a whole just didn't look all that exciting. Like you said, 13 accepted penalties. McDermott looked a little bit shaken in the coaching/defense role that he was playing in, and overall it didn't look good for the most part at all. I mean, I would assume, I know we've kind of talked about a lot, and again, you don't want to take too much from preseason, but I would assume that these starters are possibly going to be rolled back out there at least one more time this preseason to try to tighten some of that stuff up, because it overall, like you said, just didn't look good. And I understand the Steelers are a team on the rise a little bit. They should be better this year than they were last year, but you're supposed to be arguably one of the best teams in the league. And again, it's preseason. You don't want to take too much from it, but for the most part, there just wasn't all that much exciting or positive that happened in the game. There were some things, like you mentioned, but for the most part, not great, and just not a good first look from your top starters. Finally, getting a chance to see them this first time this year.
Yeah, it will be interesting to see if they roll them back out after the putrid performance they put out. I mean, there were some there were some positives. I'll go over those in a minute. I want to go over my negatives first, get that out of the way, and then we'll end this on a
There we
nice
go.
positive note. Shakir, I don't know what the heck happened to him, but he was invisible. He played 8 snaps. I don't know what to make of him. He made two. We went over last week. Made 2 great catches, and then that ugly drop on third down to kill the drive. He just hasn't been consistent. And I don't know if what happened in practice this last week that made him just not play very much on the offensive end. I know last week it was Justin Shorter, and I know that Shakir is a second-year pro compared to the rookie Shorter, but it seemed like they kind of switched roles a bit where Shakir was just invisible, where Shorter was invisible week 1. 8 snaps for Khalil Shakir when your starters got the entire first quarter and part of the second quarter. Not great role for him. Isabella, 7 snaps on the offensive end. I know he was a gunner on the special teams, so maybe that's how they're going to try to push him onto this team. But 7 snaps, again, with the offense out there, not a great look. Middle linebacker, I will be one of the ones to first admit that I knew the Edmonds loss would be noticeable. I just didn't know it was going to be this noticeable. And Klein, I think, can get them by, but he has a ceiling, and it's not a very high ceiling, and that's expected for a 32-year-old linebacker. He's very good in the run game, but not that great in cover. I think I've seen enough of Dotson to know that he is not a reliable guy out there. I can't see him being the week 1 starter. If he is, you're in trouble. I personally can't wait to see Bernard get back to see what that looks like. I'll talk about another positive that I would really like to see in a minute, but the last one is Elam, another player that just looked invisible. A lot of times you want your CBs to look invisible, but he was out there for 53% of the snaps, and I didn't really notice him once. He wasn't getting burned, but at that point the game was kind of out of hand, and Pittsburgh wasn't tossing the ball around a lot. It was an ugly game. 13 accepted penalties are just unacceptable, regardless of preseason or not. It's just those, especially the pre-snap ones, Phil. It's just they were playing undisciplined, uninspired football until the second half when all the players that really needed to make it game film out there to make the team came on the field. But other than that, those are my negatives. And I mean, you can even toss Spencer Brown out there. He had an awful game. I don't know what they're going to do at right tackle, but a full offseason, full training camp, 2 preseason games, and Spencer Brown is not getting it done. He's going to get Josh Allen crushed back there if he doesn't tighten up and fix his game, but he has been terrible these first 2 preseason games.
And it's hard because I don't want to throw that much negativity at Brandon Beane, but because he has done such an incredible job turning this entire roster around from where it was when he started to where it is now, and you've looking at a Super Bowl aspiration team the last few years, which the Bills weren't for, over a decade. So it's really hard to throw any shade at him. But at this point, I don't know, you got to be questioning the lack of involvement for that middle linebacker, like looking at your middle linebacker room and thinking for a Super Bowl looking team that, rolling into the season, this is good enough is scary. Elam being a first round draft pick. I mean, again, trying not to jump to any conclusions about him, but his second year here, and like you said, looked invisible. He's looked bad in practice. He's looked bad in general. I mean, Dane Jackson, again, I know you don't love him. I'm not the biggest fan. I don't mind him as more of a depth CB. A CB3, I think he'd be great. A CB2 is arguably pushing it for him, but Elam should have every chance in the world to take that position, and he just hasn't at all, and that's another first-round pick. Spencer Brown, a draft pick, like you just mentioned, starting potential right guard, and he looks brutal. I mean, it just, some of these decisions recently about these draft picks especially, I mean, you look at the defensive ends that we're drafting, and they are not really hitting as much as you'd like them to hit. Shakir, 5th-round, wide receiver, I'm not really going to say much about that. If he hits, it's more of a positive than if he doesn't hit. It is what it is. But I mean, some of these decisions from Brandon Beane over the last couple of years, draft picks, and again, middle linebacker is scary. I'm not saying you're going to be able to pay Edmonds what you could pay or what he ended up getting. I do agree with letting him walk, but to not really bring anything in other than a few draft picks that, I mean, from the outside looking in, nobody really had high hopes for to take over that middle linebacker spot as well as or even comparable to Edmonds in any way, and now seeing them out there and looking just kind of miserable. And again, you're looking at a Super Bowl ready team this year before Josh Allen's contract really kicks in, and I don't know, they just didn't, to me, do enough to address that middle linebacker position, and some of these other spots are just looking a little scary. I think the team overall probably fine. I'm not saying that they're, all of a sudden going to lose all these games and not make playoffs or anything like that, but one preseason game with the starters and some of these other decisions, they're looking a little bit shakier than I think we would like them to look for what we're hoping from this team this year.
So, Phil, you just ripped Brandon Beane. We're going to make that a clip. I wrote down the time. But, to switch to the positives here, I'm going to pat Brandon Beane on the back here because I think the players that stood out the most to me were the ones he just drafted. So he's had a shaky history of draft picks, and I think we both have given him the correct amount of criticism for those kind of picks. I mean, Boogie Basham even has looked very, very good, but AJ Epinesa has looked invisible. So a lot of picks have looked invisible. But, I mean, this year's draft class looks good. Dalton Kincaid got the majority of the snaps for tight ends because Dawson Knox did not play because he hurt his finger in Thursday's practice, I think it was. But he looked great. He looked quick. He looked off the line. There doesn't look like there's a cornerback or a linebacker that can really cover him. He's too big for the cornerbacks. He's too fast for the linebackers. I love it. I'm not comparing him to anybody, Phil, but there's some guy out west. Not fully west. He still plays on the AFC, but that's kind of where I'm leaning right now. But I'm not going to say his name because I don't want to compare him to that great. But, Osiris Torrance looks like he's locked up the right guard spot. He's locked that spot down. It looks great. Another player that I hinted just a couple minutes ago that I would like to see a shot at the middle linebacker position, but they already took him out of competition for it. Dorian Williams, once again, back-to-back games, he's just flashed. He looks very athletic. He's a big-bodied, hard-hitting linebacker out there. I just wish they would have. I know that I don't think they wanted to give him the Mike linebacker role. I thought maybe they think it was too much of a responsibility for him, and I understand he was a third-round pick, but you gave the whole kit and caboodle to Tremaine Edmonds in his rookie year. I know he's a first-round pick, but you gave him the Mike linebacker role and just said, hey, roll with it. We'll work it out. I know this is a Super Bowl team here that they want to go win the Super Bowl, and it's not like 2018 where it was a rebuild year, but Dorian Williams has earned an opportunity to try to grab that role and run with it. I hope they use this last week, preseason games and practices to kind of see what he's got. Justin Shorter, he looks like he could have a limited role on this offense, kind of like Khalil Shakir had last year. Those were nice catches. He looked like a legit wide receiver in the offense. And then Alex Austin, the seventh round cornerback, he looks like he could develop into legit cornerback depth on this team. I really liked his play. He made some nice tackles in the backfield. I really liked his speed and his agility, and he just looks like a good player. I don't think he's going to make an impact on the team this year, but put him on the practice squad if you can get him down there. He looks like he's a player that you could develop and could turn into like a Dane Jackson type role where you just can't replace him. Martin had a great day punting. That kind of sums up the day that the team had. And then I thought Kingsley Jonathan, I thought he made some big plays in the second half, and I think he could be a guy, now that Shane Ray's on the IR, that could push Shaq Lawson for that fifth defensive end role if and what looks like Von Miller starts on the PUP list going into the season. So I thought those were some names, and you see a bunch of draft picks this year making some names for themselves early and late in the game. Those are some players that stood out to me, and I really liked their play on Saturday in the pile of poop that was the Buffalo Bills game.
So when are you gonna buy in on the Kincaid train? The Kincaid hype?
I'm more open.
I know you're hesitant, which is fair.
I'm still hesitant. I am not going all in on him winning Rookie of the Year. I'm not even going to put him in contention and a finalist for Rookie of the Year, but I think he will have more of a role on the offensive side of the ball than I thought he would going into training camp. I'll put it that way.
I'll take it. I'll take it.
I'm not all in yet.
More in than you were.
I have poured more of the glass of water to make it half full.
I was going to say, instead of half full, where are you? But you just said, so you're up to half.
Yeah, I'm about half full. I'm about halfway in. Halfway in. 1 foot in the pool. 1 foot in the pool.
Cup is still half empty on Dalton Kincaid.
Yes.
That's fair. He is. He's a rookie. First round, which is great, but still a rookie, and a rookie tight end / wide receiver / whatever you want to call him. He does look really good, though, which is exciting. I mean, like you just mentioned, some of this year's rookie class looks very good. Like, a lot of them are stepping up, Kincaid being the big weapon you added to offense, and I think the fan base and analysts and everybody were kind of looking for something for the Bills offense to take that next step, to just have another outlet. Again, we mentioned it plenty of times, that Beasley role really has been vacated since he's been gone. I mean, last year was pretty much nothing, and you saw Allen just kind of get stuck bombing it deep on 3rd and 2, and he would just look for a 60-yard pass and hope it kind of worked out, and I don't think that's really anything against him. Just kind of how the team ended up being called, play calls, and just how it was directed. But hopefully Kincaid can be one of those players that, with the amount of talent that the Bills have on offense, he can kind of sneak through and be one of those players that is a little bit underneath and more of the safety blanket for Josh Allen, because I don't think he really has that right now, other than, staring down Diggs and Diggs begging for the ball because he deserves it, because he's one of the best wide receivers out there and he usually catches it. But I think he needs a true Beasley type safety blanket, and I think Kincaid is slowly developing into that potential. I think that'd be huge for Allen and huge for this offense. So it's good to see him continue to make strides. And like you said, what was a brutal preseason game by these starters that we were pretty excited to see rolled out.
So, Phil, we got one preseason game left. Takes place next Saturday. Well, this coming up Saturday. I apologize. I forgot it's already. Whatever. My brain is scattered. It's a weird Monday. I did it again. Next game is Saturday, 1 p.m. versus the Bears. It is another away game, but it's their final tune-up game before that Monday night opening Week 1 matchup versus the New Jersey Jets. And it's going to be a rivalry game of epic proportions. The biggest game, I think the most competitive game, you might call it, between the two teams in years. I don't remember the last time the Bills and the Jets were going into the season expecting to be very good. So final tune-up game. We will see if the starters will get another opportunity after the poop of a game they put out on Saturday. I don't know if I expect it, but I wouldn't be shocked if it happened. So, Phil, we'll move forward. Fantasy Blitz time. And I think our draft prep is done because our drafts are done. And I know producer Pat is on his way as you're listening to this across the country. He's actually across the world. He's traveling across the world. So he is away from us for 3 or 4 weeks now. So have happy travels. I know he's listening to this episode as he flies like 24 hours time, whatever. He's going to enjoy this. But Pat, enjoy this fantasy tip from us. So we're done with the draft parts of it. Phil, what is your top tip for winning your league this year? And whatever you say, I'm going to steal it because I'm winning our league this year.
That's fair. And I think you and I both do this already, so you're good. But
okay,
my number one tip, and it's what would seem to be obvious one, but at the same time, I don't know if it always is. And especially for a lot of people in some of our leagues, it's absolutely not an obvious one for some reason, even though it should be. But that is to simply stay active throughout the entire season. Whether it is trying to find trades, trying to find people in the waiver wire, just always looking to improve your team. I mean, there's always things you can do. I mean, the second the draft was over, half of our league started going into trade mode. Others are just staring at their roster, wondering what they can do to make it better, looking at other teams. Can we flip this, flip that? And I think that's just such a huge part of what fantasy football is, but more than anything, it's just what you have to do if you want to win. The team you draft with, yes, sometimes if you're lucky and get, I guess, very lucky, can be a team to win a championship with. But for the most part, you have to find things on waiver wires. You have to find, what the next star is going to be. The running back that went down, going and scooping up his backup, who could end up being a great rest of season championship winning player. You could go out and get a trade because you don't like your wide receiver core as much as someone else is, but they don't have good running backs, but you do. Make a good swap to just improve your team. So more than anything, I think it's just kind of staying active, always listening, keeping, just an eye on everything going on and what is happening in the league. Because if you're one of those people that kind of just sets your lineup and doesn't really care about the rest of the NFL and just watches the Buffalo Bills, which is great, enjoy it, have fun, but you're likely not going to win a championship. And if you do, it was very, very lucky, or you just drafted extremely well and nobody got injured.
Yeah, I think we both do that a ton. I mean, right after the draft, I think you and I were just messaging back and forth, just going over our teams, going over other teams, trying to figure out how we can already improve our own teams. So yeah, we definitely already do that, so I don't have to steal that. But I think your number one tip kind of blends into mine, and I have two quick ones. I promise they are quick because this is Blitz. First one, just don't quit. If you start 0-3, 0-4, don't quit on your team. There's plenty of teams that can make and do make the playoffs after going on that losing streak to start the season. You're not out of it. There's plenty of season left. A lot of things can happen. Injuries. I remember last year I was doing great. I had just traded for Joe Mixon. That following week, Breece Hall goes down. And it's just like, okay, what's the next move I can make? It's never stopping. I think that blends into your tip already. But my second one here, and I think it's a big reason why I've won two of our 6 championships. You got to take some risks. You can't just live on the floor level of players and expect to win. You can't just grab those Jacoby Myers, those Frank Gores of years past and expect to win. You got to grab those high ceiling players that can get you over the top. When my brother won, he grabbed Amon-Ra St. Brown right before he took off. I mean, you got to grab those type players that have high ceilings that can win you matchups. You got to make a trade that you think this player is ready to take off. Play the matchups more so than the players. I mean, I even started last year in the finals. In the championship game, I started Jared Goff in my title game and won the whole thing just because of the matchup. You got to take those risks. You got to look at the opportunities. You got to look at the matchups and take those calculated risks to win it. Yes, sometimes it's not going to pay off. Sometimes that rookie that's coming up in the system and might have an opportunity flames out. Yes, that backup running back that you grab on the waiver wire, he's not the guy that steps up. It's the other guy. But if you don't take those risks, you're never going to really find that high ceiling guy that can push you over the top and win those championships. And that's the key to winning championships, in my opinion, is finding those guys with the high ceilings that can win you a week. And when it comes down to playoffs, it's 1 week at a time. You got to find those great players, play the matchups. But I think these blend together. Take the risks and don't quit on your season because it's a long 14-week schedule. There's a lot of things that can happen. One injury can completely change a team's outlook on their whole season, and you can try to clean up their scraps. If they're trying to kick the season away, you can go and capitalize and steal all their players.
You can have your first-round draft pick injured year after year after year after year.
Or not even play.
Or not even play, even though everyone said he's going to play. And then he holds out for the first time in NFL history for the entire season. We don't really have to go into my fantasy history, but it's miserable. It is a miserable fantasy history, but still the, most winningest team during the season?
You are, by 1 win. Yeah. I'm right on your tail.
Still have it despite my troubles with, it's brutal. It's a brutal world out there, but we'll wrap Fantasy Blitz up.
So that was Fantasy Blitz for this week. I thought we did a pretty good job. I might have ranted a bit too long to make it a blitz, but we blitzed nonetheless.
It's slowly getting there.
We are getting there. We're fine-tuning. This is still preseason for us, and we have a couple more before the season kicks off, and then we'll dive into our regular scheduled Fantasy Blitz ideas that we have going on. But we'll move on to our final segment here, Buffalo Bandits offseason review so far. There's been a lot of transactions that have happened. Phil, there's not a single player brought into the organization that wasn't here last year. And I think that's unbelievable considering they won a championship. In a lot of sports, and I know lacrosse and the NLL is a bit different than other sports just because of, players have other jobs. This is kind of like a part-time job for them. So there's not as much movement after a championship. It's not like, hey, this player is going away to make a 4-year deal making millions and millions of dollars. It's not happening in the NLL.
Tyreek Hill, maybe?
Yeah, Tyreek Hill, those type of players. It's not happening with the NLL, but I think it's important to re-sign all the players you did because they're the ones that just won you championships. So I figure let's go over the review so far, kind of go over the moves that have been made. I know we've talked about them nonstop on here, but let's just review them for the people that have not caught those episodes because it is off season. A lot of people miss episodes. Dane Smith is on the franchise tag. Brandon Robinson is back on a 1-year deal. Kyle Buchanan is back on a 1-year deal. Nate Kuznetsnikov is on a 2-year deal, and Chase Frazier qualifying offer. So those are your 4 group. In the transition game, Ian McKay is on a qualifying offer right now. Nick Weiss re-signed for 1 year. That is the transition game. On defense, Adam Bomberry 1 year, Steve Priolo 1 year, Frank Brown 1 year, Bryce Sweeting 1 year, Justin Martin 1 year, Carter McKenzie 1 year. All 1-year deals for that lockdown defense that, along with Matt Vince, who just signed a 2-year deal, which was still unbelievable. I can't believe they got him for 2 years. Locked down in the championship game 3 for 4 goals. The only player they lost, Phil, after a championship win and a championship title victory that they just had is Ethan O'Connor signed 2-year deal with Rochester. He's the only player they lost. There's, besides Doug Buchan and Greg Harnett, who are both on the holdout list, there is nobody else, I believe, that is in jeopardy of leaving the Buffalo Bandits. So everybody that made a contribution for the team last year is locked in and will be with the Buffalo Bandits next year, at least with the organization. They're not going elsewhere unless there's a trade or something. Nobody can scoop them up in free agency.
Yeah, and it's exactly what you said, and we've mentioned it before. I mean, this team has been to 3 straight finals for a reason, and if you can bring all those players back to run it back again, their championship window is wide open, especially after they re-signed Vince. That was the huge one that we were all kind of waiting for and looking for. Was he going to be able to come back? I still think Shanahan would have been serviceable, but like you mentioned before, I think that takes a team. To me, I think the Bandits would have been playoffs and then pushing potentially.
Yep.
I think it would have been an upset, but I think you still would have been pushing for a final, but it would have been a lot tougher. Matt Vince, like Josh Burns said, the whole league is upset that he's back, and they should be. The Bandits are thrilled he's back, and every single one of these players that you just mentioned, especially some of these guys who we haven't even really seen a lot of. Bomberry, yes, we saw a decent amount of him, but he came in partway through this year. Frank Brown's been injured for a while, came back toward the end of the year. Still haven't seen him for a full season for a while. Carter McKenzie was in and out of the lineup. Brandon Robinson played amazing early on, then got injured. So something that we talked about over and over and over last year was seeing this team fully healthy for the first time, and that really happened in playoffs when they really started to take off as a entire team and play extremely well. Was the first time they were truly healthy, and that was still without Brandon Robinson. So we really just haven't really seen this team fully healthy as a unit, and they just won a championship, minus a few players that are now going to be back, hopefully healthy and ready to go next year. So, I mean, if they can just run it back like they did, I have full faith that, that was the path to go. I don't think they really needed to go out of their way to sign any of these other free agents or make any big trades. I mean, yes, you'd love to see it, but at the same time, this team is locked and loaded to just run it back and repeat exactly what they just did.
I guess I'll ask this question, and then we can kind of move on to if there's anything else in the free agent market that we might be interested in. But are there any of these signings that more surprised you? Maybe the length of the deal, maybe that they actually re-signed back in Buffalo. Are there any of these players that you thought you were at risk of losing and you were more shocked that the Buffalo Bandits were able to retain them?
I mean, as you were reading off all of these offers and everything that happened, the 1-year deals are annoying. I understand it's kind of how the NLL works. You don't see too many long-term deals unless you're Dylan Ward busting out a 5-year contract out of nowhere. But for the most part, a lot of these players end up doing 1 year. I mean, even them themselves, I get it from their standpoint. They don't know what's going on with their own career. You just mentioned a lot of them have 2 jobs, which most of them do. So, your career could go anywhere a year from now. You just don't know. They have families, they have lives that they have to kind of take care of while they're also trying to play in this league. So I understand why 1-year deals happen, but we're going to be going through so much of this again next year with all these 1-year deals. I mean, and
more so.
Right. And to me, it's going to be the same questions next year. Is Priolo going to come back no matter what happens? Is Kyle Buchanan going to come back? And I think that's the one more than anything that I don't want to say I'm surprised at. If he was going to play again, I was hoping he would obviously really come back here. And I was really happy to see the Bandits were able to get him back. I don't know. I mean, you never know what a player's thinking or what's going on in their lives. So he could have very well gone somewhere else, but I think he loves Buffalo and just loves playing for this team. So I don't think he really would have gone somewhere else if Buffalo was willing to have him if he was going to play again. But I think, was the biggest question mark in off season other than Vince, as far as just a player that might not have came back at all if he wanted to just retire with that championship. And if he did come back, was he really going to choose Buffalo again, or was he going to go somewhere else? So I think he's one of the more interesting ones, especially because we've talked about the young talent that the Bandits have and how often we've kind of brought them up. So it was also, do the Bandits want him again? Not that I think, what he did last year on this team was incredible, and I'm so happy he's back. I'm not saying that he's by any means, a negative person to bring back. He's going to be an incredible player again, and his production hasn't slowed down even slightly, and he's remained healthy. So I'm really happy he's back. But the Bandits have a lot of young forwards that they could have just kind of wanted to see put into that place and put into that position and said, okay, we like Buchanan a lot, but we want to see what some of these young guys have to offer, especially on that right side of the field. We have players like Nate Kay and Sam LaRue who we want to see, injected into this lineup. So they could have offered, could have just decided not to bring him back. So to me, he was the biggest question mark of the entire offseason, other than Matt Vince, same reason of just retiring. But I'm really happy they brought Buchanan back because, like we mentioned a lot, this team's championship window is wide open. Everything he brings to the team, and it's a lot of the off-ball stuff, the loose balls, the veteran leadership that he offers this team, especially that forward group. And while everyone was getting injured other than Dane Smith, he was the one staying out there, staying healthy, and playing just incredible lacrosse. So I'm really happy he's back, but he was probably one of the ones that was one of my bigger question marks, is if he was going to return or not.
Yeah, I think for me, it was, I'm going to take the easy one out. It's Matt Vince, and it's not that he returned. I mean, it was because I had him 50-50 if he was going to come back, but it's getting him under contract for 2 years. Matt, where was this last year, man? Why did you have to put us through 2 off seasons of this, of nerve-wracking? Why couldn't you just sign a 2-year deal last year and we didn't have to worry about it this year? But yeah, it was the 2-year deal that Matt Vince got, because I saw the post, hey, we got Matt Vince back, and I didn't notice that underneath it again, they listed it was a 2-year deal, so I clicked on the link, I was reading about it, and I went, sign a 2-year deal. I went, wait, how did I miss that? Like, I saw the post, how did I miss it was a 2-year deal? I love that it was a 2-year deal. So happy to have him back and that we don't have to worry about it next year. But like you said, with the 1-year deals, Phil, I'm not concerning anybody because we're still going through this offseason, but you see all the 1-year deals that the Buffalo Bandits signed. There are 4 guys currently that are locked in under contract for next year. Not this coming up 23-24 season. I know I'm looking way down the line, but why not? There's 4 guys that are locked in under contract for the 24-25 season, and it's Nate Kay, it's Sam LaRue, it's Dalton Solver, and Matt Vince. Those are the 4 guys locked in, pen to paper, locked in for a contract in the following season. So it's not going to get any easier next year, Phil. It's going to be probably even more difficult because Josh Byrne, Chris Cloutier are both up for contracts needing next year too. So it's going to be a fun time next year, but we're living in the moment now. We can worry about that 365 days from now. Phil, are there any free agents still out there on the market? And I know we did this about the same time last year. Actually, I think around this time, Matt Vince was signing his deal, and we were kind of relaxed. Are there any players out there, and I know there's some bigger names out there. There's Shashawn Evans, and I just got a bunch of people roll their eyes. Stephen Keogh, Logan Shush, Chad Cummings. Is there any player out there really that perks your interest that you might go, he might be a fit for the Buffalo Bandits right now?
No. Long story short, no. I mean, the Bandits, we've talked about re-signing all their own players, and right now, if you look at that roster in its totality, I don't think they have room for the players they currently have as far as fighting for playing time and who's going to play and what the lineup's actually going to look like. They are pretty similar to last year, where they have a lot of talent that are going to be healthy scratches throughout the entire season. Yes, we saw a ton of injuries last year, and that's why you need the depth. That's why you wanted to bring all these players back. I have no issue with anything they did, but I think this lineup is just beyond loaded with talent, and I don't think there's anyone I would want to inject into this lineup or in this locker room that's outside of who they already have that really would make that big of an impact or that big of a difference, especially considering when, again, I think they're going to struggle on a nightly basis, or a weekly basis, just trying to figure out who's going to make their own active lineup. And yeah, I think there's going to be a constant shuffle and constant fight for playing time, which is great, for a team that you want players every single game going out there playing like they want to play next week, just not only against their opponent, but for their own team, because I think a lot of these players are going to be fighting for playing time because they're just that loaded of a roster, and I think they're just that ready to go for another year.
I do agree. There's no UFAs out there that perk my interest at all. There's some fun names out there, and they would be fun to bring to Buffalo. But like you said, there's with the lineup they have, and we said this last year, there was no room last year, and they found a way to do it. This year, I think the only other names, well, quote-unquote newer names for the more average fans out there, and that's not an insult to you whatsoever, please don't take that as an insult, is the draft picks from last year, Zach Belter and Cam Wires. And they were both first-round draft picks last year. It'll be interesting to see when the contracts are getting signed. Wires is still playing in the PLL right now, so maybe they're waiting for that to end. Belter just finished his last year in college. They're both defensive players, and you just saw how many players got re-signed to the defense. There's no room on this team right now, Phil, and there's still 5 draft picks, including these 2 first-round draft picks, that need to sign pen to paper. Last year, they brought in Cullen Monroe. They brought in Thomas Vason. They brought Zach Miller, my boy, Zach Miller, or Nick Miller. I apologize, Nick Miller. Zach Miller is a former tight end for Oakland, I think it was, for football. But you saw Vason make the team and then get traded to Albany for Bomberry, which ended up being a great deal. And then now he's out in Vegas. But you saw Nick Miller and Cullen Monroe get cut at training camp. So it'll be interesting to see if they can make some moves so they don't end up having to cut any guys. I'm not saying that Belter and Wires are going to be ones that end up being the chopping blocks because they're first-round draft picks. Why would you do that? But it'll be interesting to see if there's any other moves being made by Dietrich to kind of free up some spots for these young guys coming up. I'm not trying to push any of the older vets out, but there's just on a team this good that just won a championship that would just finish going into 3 straight finals, looking to go to a 4th straight finals. There's just not a ton of room on a team like that. And to try to bring in new faces and new guys that are, just drafted to your organization, including the draft picks they have coming up this draft that's coming up on the 15th, I believe it is. It's they're going to have to make rooms for they're going to have to make moves to make room for the new faces in the organization.
You figured it out.
I got to it.
Yeah, to me, I wonder if, both of these guys, like you mentioned, Belter and Wires, both defensemen, both 6'5", about 220, so they're bigger body defensemen, which I think is great. I think it's something the team will be needing in the future, and to me, I wonder if that's where we'll see this team kind of be pushed. I wonder if they're going to continue signing, if they draft people, if they're going to continue drafting players that can't play this year and continue drafting players that are still developing in college or have that extra year so they can kind of push that draft pick down the line. Or do they start simply, linking some of these draft picks together, that you trade away your second and your third this year to get a first next year, first in 2 years, or take, your first and second to get a higher, predicted first or second a year later? Like, do they just start kicking some of these draft picks down the road so they have an influx of youth and talent when some of these players, like a Priolo, like a Matt Vince, like a Buchanan, as some of these players start to age out a little bit, do you continue to just try to kick some of these draft picks down the road so when that time comes, you have a just influx of youth and talent ready to come in, ready to be drafted and immediately make an impact? It's just, like you said, there's just no room on this team. They've lost one player this offseason, Ethan O'Connor, and I think Belter or Wires could take over that style role. I know they're both defensemen. I think Wires right now is playing midfield for the PLL, so maybe he's a little bit more of that transition type that Ethan O'Connor was, but that's really the only spot available. And that it's, I mean, yes, you want to see these guys signed, and yes, you want to get them on the practice squad, in the organization, learning from Johnny T, learning to play with these players, and you want them just signed and on the team. I mean, it's a huge deal to get some of these top draft picks part of your organization so you can start developing them. But like you said, for their draft picks that are coming up, the other draft picks they have outside of these two guys and future ones, I just don't know what you do. And I don't think it's really necessary for them to trade away draft picks to get a player. I think that's where the struggle kind of comes in. Like, you can package your entire, this year's draft class and say, we don't need any of it right now. Let's package all of it and get a player. But I don't think they need a player really that much either. Like, yes, you always want to see, there's better players out there that are on this roster. It's absolutely true. There's top talent around the entire league that isn't on this roster. So you can always add a player to get better, but I don't think the Bandits need to, and I don't want to see them just waste all their draft picks. But at the same time, like you mentioned, when are you signing these guys and where are they fitting into this team? You've already traded away a few of them in Nick Miller and Thomas Vason recently. So, I mean, are we going to just see them continue to draft players and then trade them away because they don't have a spot? Or are they going to try
Monroe and Nick Miller were not actually traded. They were just cut. Yeah.
Which is, again, you're drafting players who are good and talented, and then you don't have any spots for them, so they're cut, and that's it. So it's essentially a wasted draft pick. So do you just kind of kick those down the road and hopefully you can use them in the future, in a couple years when you actually need some youthful talent and actually have a few roster spots? Or do you try to trade the pick away to get something? But I just don't know what this team is going to need or use, or I don't know. It's a really good spot to be in, but also tough and depressing at the same time.
That's exactly what I was going to say. Like, the long story short is,
it's great.
This is a great, it's a great problem to have, that you have this much talent that you just don't have any more room for the more talent that you still have in your organization. But I think the last part that I want to just point out that you said that I thought was very, very smart, and I'm patting you on the back, even though you can't see me, I'm doing it video-wise. The drafting for future. And I think that's a great point, where in this coming up draft in September, I think if the Bandits are smart, which I know they are, they're a fantastic run organization, I think they're going to be drafting for the following year just so they can push this quote-unquote problem down the road, that they don't have to deal with, hey, we got to make more room for the guys that are coming here because they want to turn pro. They're going to look for – I'm not saying that they're going to pass over great players for these type of players that, they're not going to come out and become pro following this coming year. It's going to be it's the following year. They can push their problem down the road, quote-unquote problem. But I thought that was a great note by you, and I think that's a quote-unquote solution for one of the problems they're having. But again, it's just keep pushing the problem down the road, that you can deal with it.
Down the road.
Yeah, it's a FBP, future Bandit problem. So Phil, is there anything else to this episode before we shut it down for another week and then just go stare at our fantasy lineups until September 7th? I think is the start of the season.
Yeah, that's the only negative about fantasy right now. Is like we do all this listening, all this research for these drafts. It's a huge weekend. We build it all up, and then you sit there. Now that it's over, all the excitement of drafting, like, all right, I got my teams, and now you sit there and wait anxiously for the season to start. It's a very calm before the storm, but it's a very, I don't know, it's a big calm and kind of, not depressing, but like you said, you just stare at your lineup that doesn't do anything. It's that gif of that, stick figure with his stick just poking, do something. But for you, I mean, you got to worry a little bit about your roster. Yeah. At least you're actively following something, so that's good in a way.
Yeah, that's fun, Phil. Thanks for pointing that out. But we drafted this early thanks to producer Pat, who, again, is flying halfway around the world right now. But seriously, producer Pat, we're going to miss you. We'll see you in about a month, but have a fun and safe trip over there. I know you're going to live it up. It's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, and you're taking it and running with it, and very, very happy for you. But if you want to, wish Pat on his merry way, you can follow us on all our social media sites that I'm about to list right now. But thank you all for listening to another episode of the Buffalo Sports Collective. As I just teased, you can follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Buffalo Sports Collective, and on threads, I should say, there too. And on Twitter at Buffalo Sports Co. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel wherever you listen to podcasts. Make sure you visit our website at buffalosportscollective.com. And make sure you leave us a review on Apple and Spotify. Don't forget to look for that link to help out Curtis Wager. I apologize if I'm saying his name wrong. But again, we're going to put that in all our posts. If you have any donations or any kind of money you can spare to help them out, it would go a long, long way. But until next time, bye-bye.